when an alpha publicly rejects you in front of the entire pack, but the bond remains unbroken. Standing in the middle of Ironvale Square, Kayla looks Roran, her alpha mate, into the eyes as he declares his choice of another woman. The pack of wolves awaits her downfall. They await the cry of pain as the bond is torn apart, but Kayla only smiles. And the bond remains. No one understands what's happening, not even Roran. Stay until the end to see how Kayla turns disaster into her weapon. Like if you're watching from a certain city, and comment below. We want to know what you think. The wind carried the scent of pine and old snow across Ironvale's main square, but Kayla barely felt the cold. She stood perfectly still as 200 wolves formed a loose circle around her and Roran, their eyes gleaming in the late afternoon light. The wooden platform beneath her boots creaked, the same platform where she'd stood 3 years ago when Roran had claimed her as his mate in front of the entire pack. Now he was unclaiming her on the exact same spot. I, Roran, Alpha of the Ironvale pack, sever my bond with Kayla. His voice rang out clear and formal, each word pronounced like he'd rehearsed it. Probably had. I choose another. Sarah will stand as my mate and future Luna. Beside him, Sarah practically glowed. Young, soft-featured, with that careful smile women wore when they'd won something they'd been scheming for. Her hand rested on Roran's arm like she'd already claimed ownership. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked hungry for drama. Kayla kept her spine straight and her expression neutral. She'd known this was coming for weeks, had seen it in the way Roran looked through her instead of at her, in the way he'd started finding reasons to be elsewhere whenever she entered a room. She wasn't stupid. She'd just been waiting. Kayla, Roran's voice dropped lower, almost gentle. That was worse somehow. You understand this is necessary. The pack needs... You don't have to explain. Her voice came out steady, calm. I heard you the first time. His jaw tightened. He'd expected tears, probably. Or anger. Something he could respond to, something that would make him look magnanimous in front of everyone. Instead, she just stood there, hands loose at her sides, watching him like she was watching a stranger. The thing was, she'd loved him once. Really loved him. When they'd first bonded, she'd felt like she could finally breathe after years of holding herself small and quiet. Roran had been different then. Or maybe she'd just been blind. Either way, that version of him had disappeared somewhere along the line, replaced by this man who cared more about appearances than truth. The bond, Elder Moira called out from the edge of the platform, her reedy voice cutting through the murmurs. It should break now. She should feel it. All eyes turned to Kayla. She felt the weight of their stares, felt the expectation pressing against her skin like a physical thing. In a normal rejection, the mate bond would snap the moment an alpha severed it. The rejected wolf would drop to their knees, screaming, as the psychic connection tore apart. Some didn't survive it. Most wished they hadn't. Kayla took a slow breath and waited. Nothing happened. The bond hummed quietly in the back of her mind, exactly where it had always been. A thin golden thread connecting her consciousness to Roran's. She could still feel his presence, still sense the edges of his emotions. Confusion, mostly, and a growing threat of alarm. Kayla? Roran took a step toward her, his brow furrowing. Do you feel anything? She tilted her head slightly. Should I? His confusion spiked into something sharper. Around them, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Wolves were looking at each other now, eyebrows raised, mouths moving in hurried whispers. This isn't possible, Sarah hissed, her polished smile finally cracking. She's faking it. She has to be. You can't fake a bond, Darius said quietly from somewhere behind Kayla. She didn't turn to look at him, but she felt a small flicker of gratitude for the intervention. Darius had always been the reasonable one, Roran's beta, his second in command, and one of the few wolves in Ironvale who'd ever treated her like a person instead of an ornament. Elder Moira climbed onto the platform, her ancient joints cracking audibly. She moved close to Kayla, close enough that Kayla could smell the sage and wood smoke that clung to her clothes. The old woman's eyes were sharp despite her age, shrewd and calculating. Show me your wrist, Moira commanded. Kayla held out her right arm without hesitation. Every bonded pair bore a mark, a small silvery scar that appeared when the bond formed, a physical manifestation of the psychic link. Hers sat just below her pulse point, a delicate whorl that had always reminded her of a fingerprint. Moira traced it with one gnarled finger. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. "It's still there," the elder announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. "The bond remains intact." The crowd erupted. Wolves talked over each other, voices rising in pitch and volume. Some were angry, some confused. A few looked frightened. Kayla caught fragments of conversation. "Never heard of this. What does it mean? She must have done something." But she kept her focus on Roran. He looked furious now. The careful mask of alpha authority had slipped, revealing the frustration underneath. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. This was supposed to be clean, simple. A public rejection, a new mate, and Kayla quietly fading into the background. Instead, she'd just become the center of attention. "This is a trick," Roran bit out, directing his words at Moira but keeping his eyes on Kayla. "Some kind of magic or—" "There's no magic in Ironvale," Moira interrupted, her tone dry as dust. "You know that as well as I do. Whatever's happening here is natural, unprecedented, but natural." Sarah moved closer to Roran, practically plastering herself against his side. "Then make her leave. If the bond won't break, exile her. Get her away from the pack." Kayla almost laughed. Of course that's where this would go. When you couldn't control something, you removed it. "The council will meet tonight," Elder Moira declared before Roran could respond. "We'll decide what to do about this situation." "There's nothing to decide," Roran snapped. "I've made my choice. Sarah is my mate now." "And yet the bond says otherwise." Moira turned her sharp gaze on him. "You cannot have two mates, Roran. The laws are clear on that." "I don't have two mates?" "I have one." He pulled Sarah closer, his arm wrapping around her waist. "Kayla is still bonded to you," Darius finished quietly. He'd moved closer, now standing just at the edge of the platform. His dark eyes met Kayla's for a brief second, and she saw the question there. "Are you all right?" She gave the tiniest nod. "This is insane," Sarah said, her voice pitching higher. "She's doing this on purpose, trying to ruin everything." "How exactly would I do that?" Kayla spoke for the first time since the bond should have broken, her voice cutting through Sarah's rising hysteria. "How would I force a bond to stay intact when the Alpha himself just severed it? Please, enlighten me." Sarah's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Roran's hand tightened on Sarah's waist. "Enough. Everyone disperse. The council will handle this." But the crowd didn't move. They were too caught up in the spectacle, too hungry for answers. Kayla could feel their attention like a physical pressure, could sense the shift in how they looked at her. Before, she'd been invisible, the quiet Luna who attended ceremonies and smiled at the right times and never caused problems. Now she was something else, something they couldn't categorize, something dangerous. "I said disperse!" Roran's voice cracked like a whip, laced with alpha command. This time the wolves obeyed. They scattered slowly, reluctantly, throwing glances over their shoulders as they went. Within minutes, the square had mostly emptied, leaving only Kayla, Roran, Sarah, Moira, and a handful of elders clustered near the platform's edge. "You'll come to the council meeting," Moira told Kayla. It wasn't a question. "Sunset. Don't be late." Kayla nodded once. The old woman shuffled off, the other elders trailing behind her like a line of crows. Sarah tugged at Roran's sleeve, whispering something urgent in his ear, and after a moment he allowed himself to be pulled away. But not before throwing one last look at Kayla, a look that promised this wasn't over. Then she was alone on the platform. Almost alone. "That was quite a performance," Darius said, climbing up to stand beside her. Kayla let out a long breath, some of the tension bleeding from her shoulders now that the crowd had gone. "I wasn't performing." "I know." He studied her profile, his expression thoughtful. "You really don't feel anything? No pain?" "Nothing." She flexed her fingers, feeling the bond pulse faintly in the back of her mind. "It's still there. Exactly like it was before. That shouldn't be possible. So everyone keeps saying—" Darius was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting across the empty square. He was tall, broader through the shoulders than Roran, with the kind of presence that made people pay attention without him having to demand it. He'd been beta for 5 years now, and in that time, he'd probably prevented a dozen challenges to Roran's authority through sheer diplomatic skill. The council is going to push for exile, he said finally. You know that, right? I figured. And you're just okay with that? Kayla turned to look at him properly. What choice do I have? He held her gaze, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. You could fight it, demand a trial, appeal to pack law. Pack law says an alpha can reject his mate for any reason, and that the rejected mate has no standing to challenge it. She'd memorized every relevant statute over the past few weeks, preparing for exactly this. There's no fight to be had. There's also no precedent for a bond that won't break. True, she smiled faintly, but I don't think that's going to work in my favor. Darius shook his head slowly, something that might have been admiration flickering across his face. You're handling this remarkably well. What else am I supposed to do? Fall apart? Most people would. I'm not most people. The corner of his mouth twitched. No, you're really not. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower toward the mountains. The temperature was dropping fast, it always did this time of year, and Kayla could see her breath misting in the air. She should go inside, should start packing probably, since exile seemed inevitable. But she didn't move. Kayla, Darius's voice had changed, gone lower and more serious. There's something you should know. She waited. Some of the wolves, they're not planning to wait for the council's decision. Her pulse kicked up a notch. What do you mean? I overheard Marcus and his friends talking. They think you're a threat. They think as long as the bond exists, it undermines Roran's authority. He paused. They want to deal with you before sunrise. Deal with. Such a polite euphemism for murder. Kayla's hands curled into fists at her sides. How many? At least 5. Maybe more. And you're telling me this why? Because despite what Roran might think, I don't believe in killing people for being inconvenient. Darius's jaw tightened. If you run tonight, you'll have a head start. I can delay them for a few hours. She turned that over in her mind, weighing options. Running meant survival, probably, but it also meant spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, never settling, never trusting. And it meant they'd won. Roran, Sarah, all the wolves who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. No, she said quietly. No? I'm not running. Darius stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Kayla, they're going to kill you. Maybe. She met his eyes, let him see the steel underneath her calm exterior. Or maybe something else happens. What else could possibly happen? She smiled, a real smile this time, sharp around the edges. I guess we'll find out. The council meeting took place in the Great Hall, a massive timber structure at the center of Ironvale that smelled perpetually of smoke and old leather. Kayla arrived exactly at sunset, as instructed, and found the elders already assembled around a long wooden table. Roran sat at the head, Sarah perched beside him like a decorative bird. Darius stood against the far wall, his arms crossed, his expression neutral. Moira gestured to an empty chair facing the table. Sit. Kayla sat. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The elders exchanged glances, communicating in that silent way old people did when they'd known each other for decades. Finally, Elder Garrett, a grizzled man with more scars than smooth skin, cleared his throat. This is an unusual situation, he began, his voice gravelly. We've consulted the records, spoken to the other packs. Nobody has ever heard of a bond surviving rejection. Unheard of doesn't mean impossible, Moira added, shooting Garrett a pointed look. It means unpredictable, Garrett shot back. Potentially dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Kayla asked. All eyes turned to her. To the pack, Roran said, leaning forward. As long as this bond exists, there's confusion about who my mate actually is. That confusion weakens my authority. Your authority weakens your authority, Kayla said before she could stop herself. Sarah gasped. Several elders looked scandalized, but Roran just narrowed his eyes, his alpha presence pressing against her like a warning. Careful, he said softly. Or what? You'll reject me again? She tilted her head. Already tried that. Darius made a noise that might have been a cough covering a laugh. Roran's face darkened. The solution is simple. Exile. Remove her from Ironvale, from Packlands entirely. The bond can't function over that kind of distance. It'll fade naturally. We don't know that, Moira objected. We don't know anything about how this works. Then it's an experiment, Sarah chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. Exile her and see what happens. If the bond breaks, problem solved. If it doesn't, she shrugged. At least she won't be here causing trouble. I haven't caused any trouble, Kayla pointed out. Your existence is trouble, Sarah snapped, the sweet mask slipping. Enough! Elder Garrett rapped his knuckles on the table. The question before us is whether exile is the appropriate response. I say yes. All in favor? Hands went up, 5 out of 7 elders. Only Moira and one other, Elder Chen, a quiet woman who rarely spoke, abstained. Then it's decided, Garrett announced. Kayla, you are hereby exiled from Ironvale. You have until dawn to leave Packlands. If you return, you'll be treated as a rogue and dealt with accordingly. There it was, clean, simple, exactly what she'd expected. Kayla stood slowly, smoothing down her jacket. Understood. That's it? Roran looked almost disappointed. No protest? No plea for mercy? Would it change anything? He didn't answer. She turned to leave, had made it halfway to the door when Darius's voice stopped her. I'll escort her to the border, he said, pushing off from the wall. Make sure she leaves safely. That's not necessary, Roran started, but Moira cut him off. It's proper. She was Luna. She deserves that much respect. Roran looked like he wanted to argue, but Sarah's hand on his arm stopped him. He nodded once, jaw tight. Fine. But come straight back, Darius. Of course, Alpha. Kayla didn't wait to hear more. She walked out of the great hall into the cold night air, Darius falling into step beside her. Your house or straight to the border? He asked quietly once they were out of earshot. House. I need to grab a few things. They walked in silence through Ironvale's winding streets. Most of the pack was inside for the evening meal, but Kayla could feel eyes watching from windows, could sense the whispers following in their wake. News traveled fast in a pack this size. Her house, former house she supposed, sat on the edge of the residential district, a modest timber structure she'd actually liked when Roran had first brought her here. She'd spent hours fixing it up, painting the shutters blue, planting herbs in the small garden. All of that seemed pointless now. Inside she moved quickly, shoving clothes and essentials into a canvas pack. Darius waited by the door, keeping watch. They're already gathering, he said after a few minutes. Marcus and his group. I can see them from here. Kayla glanced out the window. Sure enough, shadowy figures lurked near the tree line, just beyond the house. Waiting. How long until they move? She asked, continuing to pack. Soon. They'll want to catch you before you reach the border. He paused. I can try to stop them, but don't. She closed the pack, testing its weight. You'll just get hurt. So you are planning to run? No. She turned to face him, and something in her expression made him go very still. I'm planning something else entirely. Kayla, what? Do you trust me? The question seemed to surprise him. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Yes, he said finally. I do. Good. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then I need you to listen very carefully. When we get to the forest, those wolves are going to attack. They won't give me a chance to leave peacefully. I know. And when they do, I'm going to break the bond with Roran. Darius blinked. You can do that? I think so. I've been feeling it. The bond. Studying how it works. She pressed her hand over her heart, feeling the golden thread pulse there. It's not as simple as everyone thinks. It's not just connection, it's power, and power flows both ways. I don't understand. You will. She met his eyes. I'm going to break the bond with Roran, and then I'm going to form a new one. With who? She didn't answer, didn't need to. The realization dawned on his face like sunrise, slow and inevitable. Kayla, that's not possible. You can't just choose, can't I? She tilted her head. Nobody knows how this works. Nobody knows what I can do. But I felt it, Darius. The bond isn't just about connection. It's about amplification. And I can control where that amplification goes. He shook his head slowly, looking stunned. If you're wrong, I'm not. But if you are, then I die in the forest and Roran gets what he wanted anyway. She shouldered her pack. But I'm not wrong. Darius stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Fear, hope, something that might have been awe. Why me? He asked finally. Because you're the only one who ever saw me, she said simply, and because when you become alpha, you'll be the kind of leader this pack actually needs. I don't. You are. You do. She smiled faintly. Trust me. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally just nodded, something settling in his expression. Decision. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, what do you need me to do? Just be there. And when the moment comes, don't fight it. Cryptic. Sorry, first time attempting the impossible. Despite everything, he laughed. A short, startled sound. You're insane. Probably. She headed for the door. Come on, let's not keep Marcus waiting. Atul. The forest outside Ironvale was old growth, dense with pine and fir that blocked out most of the moonlight. Kayla and Darius walked in silence, following the narrow trail that led to the pack border. Behind them, she could hear the soft footfalls of wolves who thought they were being stealthy. 5 minutes, Darius murmured. Maybe less. Good. The trail opened into a small clearing and Kayla stopped in the center of it, the perfect ambush spot. She set down her pack carefully, then straightened and waited. They didn't make her wait long. Marcus emerged from the shadows first, his wolf form rippling just beneath his skin. 4 others flanked him, wolves she recognized but had never really known. Pack members who'd looked through her the same way Roran had. That's far enough, Marcus called out, his voice rough. You're not making it to the border, Kayla. I wasn't planning to, she said calmly. That seemed to throw him. He exchanged glances with his companions, confusion flickering across his face. Darius, step away from her, Marcus said, his tone hardening. This doesn't concern you. Actually, Darius said, not moving, it does. We're acting on the Alpha's orders. Roran didn't order this, Kayla interrupted. You're acting on your own initiative, which means this is just murder. You're a threat to the pack, one of the other wolves, a woman named Sarah, snarled. That bond is unnatural. Lots of things are unnatural, Kayla said. That doesn't make them wrong. Marcus took a step forward, his eyes starting to glow with the amber light of a wolf preparing to shift. Enough talk. Last chance, Darius. Move. Darius looked at Kayla. She nodded once. He stepped aside. Marcus smiled, cruel and satisfied. Smart choice. The 5 wolves began to advance, spreading out to surround her. Kayla could feel their intent pressing against her senses. Hostile, violent, certain. They fully intended to kill her. She closed her eyes and reached for the bond. It was right there, that golden thread connecting her to Roran. She'd spent weeks studying it, learning its contours, understanding how it worked. The bond wasn't just connection. It was a conduit. Power flowed through it. Her power, amplifying Roran's natural dominance, making him stronger than he'd ever been alone. He'd never known, never realized that his sudden surge in authority 3 years ago hadn't been personal growth. It had been her. Now she wrapped her consciousness around the bond and pulled. It resisted at first, clinging stubbornly to its anchor. But she was stronger than it expected. She'd been feeding it for 3 years, after all. She knew every molecule of its structure. With a mental wrench, she tore it free. The snap was audible, a sharp crack that echoed through the clearing like breaking ice. Kayla gasped, stumbling slightly as the connection severed. But there was no pain, no agony, just release. Marcus had frozen mid-step, staring at her. What did you... She didn't let him finish. Before the power could dissipate, before the amplification could fade, she reached for Darius. He stood exactly where he'd been, watching her with wide eyes. She could feel his wolf just beneath the surface, could sense the strength there, raw and largely untapped because he'd spent years deferring to Roran, holding himself back. Not anymore. Kayla formed the bond with a thought, snapping it into place like a key turning in a lock. The connection blazed to life between them, brilliant and fierce, and she felt the power surge through it, all the amplification that had made Roran strong, now flowing into Darius instead. The effect was immediate and devastating. Darius's presence expanded like a shockwave, his alpha dominance flooding the clearing with overwhelming force. Every wolf in the area felt it, felt the shift in power, the change in hierarchy. Marcus and his companions dropped to their knees without meaning to, their wolves submitting instantly to the superior predator. Kayla watched Darius as the transformation rippled through him. His eyes glowed pure gold, his posture straightening as he finally stopped holding himself back. This was what he'd always been capable of, what he would have been from the beginning if she'd found him first. "Stand down," Darius said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. Marcus tried to resist. She could see him fighting it, trying to push back against the compulsion. But it was useless. His wolf knew who the real alpha was now. They all did. "I said stand down." Marcus's resistance crumbled. His head dropped, his shoulders hunched, every line of his body screaming submission. The other wolves were already on their stomachs, throats exposed, whining softly. Darius walked forward slowly, moving through the kneeling wolves like they were statues. He stopped in front of Marcus, looking down at the man who'd come here to commit murder. "Go back to Ironvale," Darius commanded. "Tell Roran what happened here. Tell him the bond broke. Tell him Kayla is gone." "She's right there," Sarah whimpered from her position on the ground. "Is she?" Darius glanced at Kayla, and she saw the question in his eyes. She shook her head slightly. No, she wasn't going back, not yet. Darius nodded once, understanding. He turned back to the prostrate wolves. "Kayla is gone. You never found her. Understood?" "Yes, Alpha," Marcus gasped out, the title emerging without his permission. "Good. Now go." They went, scrambling to their feet, heads still bowed, moving as quickly as they could without breaking into a run. Within seconds, the clearing was empty except for Kayla and Darius. The silence stretched. "That," Darius said finally, his voice slightly shaky, "was the most insane thing I've ever experienced. But it worked. It worked." He turned to face her fully, and she could see he was still processing what had just happened. "Kayla, what did you do to me?" "I gave you what should have been yours from the start." She moved closer, studying his face. "How do you feel? Like I could lift a mountain or fight an army?" He laughed, slightly unhinged. "This is what Roran felt like, all the time?" "Yes." "And it came from you?" "Yes." He stared at her, comprehension dawning. He didn't know, did he? No, he thought he was just naturally powerful, thought he deserved to be alpha because of his own strength. She smiled bitterly. "Men usually do. But you knew." "I figured it out eventually. Took a while, but yes." She tilted her head. "The question is, what happens now?" Darius was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. She could almost see him working through the implications, understanding what this meant for Ironvale, for Roran, for everything. "Now," he said slowly, "we wait and see how long it takes everyone else to figure it out. You're not going back tonight?" "No." He met her eyes. "Tonight, I'm making sure you're actually safe. Tomorrow, we'll deal with the rest." Kayla felt something in her chest loosen, tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get complicated." "It was always going to get complicated." "True." He smiled faintly. "But at least now we're complicated together." They stood there in the clearing, the bond humming quietly between them, and Kayla felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. By the time Marcus and his wolves stumbled back into Ironvale, dawn was already bleeding across the horizon. They moved like wounded animals, heads down, shoulders hunched, none of them meeting anyone's eyes. Word spread fast, faster than they walked. By the time they reached the Great Hall, half the pack had already gathered in the square, whispering, speculating, hungry for answers. Roran stood on the steps of the hall, Sarah beside him, both of them clearly dragged from sleep. His hair was uncombed, his shirt hastily buttoned, but his expression was sharp, focused, dangerous. Where is she? He demanded as Marcus approached. Marcus stopped at the bottom of the steps, and something about his posture made the murmurs die down. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Gone, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. We lost her in the forest. Lost her? Roran's voice cracked like a whip. 5 of you couldn't track one woman? It wasn't... Marcus swallowed hard. The bond broke. We felt it. And then what? Marcus's mouth opened and closed. Sarah, standing behind him, made a small whimpering sound. The other wolves looked anywhere but at Roran. Then nothing, Marcus finished weakly. She was just gone. Roran stared at them, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his hand moved to his chest, pressing against his sternum. Kayla had watched him do that gesture 1,000 times when he was thinking, processing. But now it looked different, uncertain. The bond, Roran said quietly. You felt it break? Yes, Alpha. A ripple went through the assembled pack. Kayla had been gone less than 6 hours, and already everything felt different, unstable, like a building with a cracked foundation that nobody had noticed until now. Sarah grabbed Roran's arm, her voice pitched low, but carrying in the sudden silence. This is good news. The problem solved itself. She's gone, the bond is broken, we can move forward. But Roran wasn't listening. He was still pressing his hand to his chest, his brow furrowed like he was trying to solve a puzzle missing half its pieces. Where's Darius? He asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. He escorted her to the border, Elder Garrett called from the edge of the crowd. Per your orders. That was hours ago. Maybe he tracked her further, Sarah suggested. Made sure she really left. Roran's jaw tightened. He looked at Marcus. Did you see him? In the forest? Marcus hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. No, Alpha. Roran's eyes narrowed. He knew his wolves, knew when they were lying. But before he could press further, movement at the edge of the square drew everyone's attention. Darius walked into view, emerging from the same forest path Marcus had used. But where Marcus had looked beaten, Darius looked different. He moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before, his spine straight, his stride even. People stepped aside as he passed, an instinctive parting that had nothing to do with conscious thought. Roran watched him approach, and something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of suspicion. Report, Roran said when Darius reached the steps. She's gone, Darius said simply. Past the border, I made sure. And the bond? Broken, just like Marcus said. Darius's expression was neutral, professional. It's over, Roran. She's not coming back. The tension in Roran's shoulders eased slightly. He nodded once, seeming to accept this. Good. Then we can finally move on. But as Darius climbed the steps to stand beside Roran, several wolves in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Their eyes tracked Darius with a new awareness, a new weight. They couldn't articulate what had changed, but they felt it. Something fundamental had shifted in the pack's hierarchy, and their instincts were screaming warnings their conscious minds couldn't quite process. Elder Moira stood near the back of the crowd, her ancient eyes sharp as she watched the exchange. She saw what others missed, the way wolves unconsciously angled toward Darius instead of Roran, the way their attention kept drifting to the beta even as the alpha spoke. Everyone, disperse, Roran commanded, his voice firm. There's work to be done. Stop standing around like tourists. The crowd began to break up, but slowly, reluctantly. People kept glancing back, kept whispering. The story of Kayla's impossible bond had already become legend, and now her disappearance added another layer of mystery. Ironvale thrived on gossip, and this would feed conversations for weeks. As the square emptied, Sarah pulled Roran aside, her voice sharp with irritation. This isn't over. People are still talking about her, still wondering. Let them wonder. She's gone. But the uncertainty will fade. Roran cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. Give it time. In a week, no one will remember her name. Sarah didn't look convinced, but she nodded, leaning into his touch. Darius watched this exchange from a few feet away, his expression carefully blank. Then he turned and walked into the great hall, leaving them alone on the steps. Inside, the hall was empty and cold. Darius moved to the far wall where a large map of pack territory hung, marked with borders and hunting grounds and human settlements to avoid. He stared at it without really seeing it, his mind elsewhere. The bond hummed quietly in the back of his consciousness, new and strange and overwhelming. He could feel Kayla through it, even at this distance. She was north, maybe 3 miles out, camped somewhere in the foothills. Safe. Waiting. The plan had been simple. Make it look like she'd disappeared, give Roran what he wanted, and wait for the inevitable collapse. Because without Kayla's amplification, Roran's authority would start to crumble. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. What Darius hadn't anticipated was how strong he'd feel. The power flowing through the bond was intoxicating, addictive. He'd spent 5 years holding himself back, deferring to Roran, playing the loyal beta. Now, with Kayla's amplification flooding through him, he finally understood what he was capable of. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Deep thoughts? Darius turned to find Elder Moira shuffling into the hall, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. "Just reviewing territory," he said mildly. Liar. She moved closer, peering up at him with those shrewd eyes. "You look different." "Do I?" "Stronger, more present." Her head tilted. "Where's the girl, Darius?" He kept his expression neutral. "Gone, like I said." "And the bond? Really broken? The bond between Kayla and Roran?" "Yes, that one's broken." Moira's eyes narrowed at his careful wording. But nothing." He turned back to the map. "Is there something you needed, Elder?" She was quiet for a long moment, studying him. Then she sighed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Be careful, boy. Whatever you're planning, be very careful. Roran may not be the strongest alpha we've ever had, but he's vicious when cornered." "I'm not planning anything." Another lie. She tapped her cane against the floor. "I've been alive a long time. Seen a lot of young wolves think they're smarter than they are. Most of them end up dead." Noted. "I mean it, Darius. If you're going to move against him, you'd better be absolutely certain you can win." He finally turned to look at her fully. "And if I don't move? If I just stay loyal, keep playing beta while Roran makes decisions that hurt the pack? Then you're a coward." She smiled faintly. "But at least you'll be a living coward." Quite the choice. "It's always the choice." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you'd make a better alpha than he ever was. You just have to survive long enough to prove it." She left before he could respond. Darius stood alone in the great hall, Moira's words echoing in his mind. He thought about Kayla, waiting in the foothills. Thought about the bond humming between them, the power it gave him. Thought about Ironvale and all the wolves who deserved better leadership than what they'd been getting. Then he thought about Roran's face when he finally realized what had happened, when he understood that his strength had never been his own. Darius smiled. This was going to get messy. 3 days passed. On the surface, Ironvale looked normal. Wolves went about their business, hunting and training and managing the 1,000 small tasks that kept a pack running. But underneath, tension simmered like water about to boil. Roran grew more irritable by the hour. Small things set him off. A hunter returning empty-handed, a patrol reporting late, someone forgetting to address him properly. He'd always had a temper, but Kayla had somehow smoothed his rough edges, kept him balanced. Now without her, those edges were all anyone saw. "You're being too harsh," Darius said on the third evening, after Roran had verbally shredded a young wolf for a minor mistake. They stood in Roran's office, a small room off the great hall that smelled of leather and old paper. "I'm being an alpha," Roran snapped back. "The pack needs discipline." "The pack needs leadership. There's a difference." Roran's eyes flashed. "Are you questioning me?" "I'm advising you. That's my job. Your job is to support me." "I am supporting you." Darius kept his voice level, reasonable. "I'm telling you that you're pushing too hard. People are starting to notice." "Let them notice." Roran poured himself a drink, the amber liquid sloshing in the glass. "Maybe they need to be reminded who's in charge." "They know who's in charge." "Do they?" Roran drained half the glass in one swallow. Because lately it feels like everyone's questioning everything I do. Second guessing. Whispering. He wasn't wrong. The whispers had started almost immediately after Kayla's departure. Nothing obvious, nothing Roran could point to and punish. Just a general sense of unease, of things not quite fitting together the way they should. Darius had noticed wolves hesitating before following Roran's orders, had seen the way they looked to him, to Darius, for confirmation before acting. It was subtle, but it was there. The pack's instincts were adjusting to the new power structure faster than their conscious minds could process. People are just adjusting, Darius said carefully. Give it time. Time, Roran laughed bitterly. Everyone keeps telling me that. Give it time, it'll settle. Things will go back to normal. He set down the glass with more force than necessary. But what if they don't? They will. You sound awfully certain. I am. Roran studied him, his expression hard to read. You've been different lately, since that night. Darius's pulse kicked up slightly, but he kept his face neutral. How so? More confident. More... Roran waved a hand vaguely. I don't know, just different. Maybe I'm just tired of watching you self-destruct. The words came out sharper than Darius intended. Roran's eyes widened, then narrowed. Careful, Roran said softly. You're my beta. That means you serve me, remember? I serve the pack, Darius corrected. Same as you. No, not the same as me. I'm alpha. That makes me... What? Infallible? Darius took a step forward. And something in the movement made Roran take an involuntary step back. You rejected your mate in front of the entire pack. You exiled her when the bond wouldn't break. You sent wolves to kill her in the forest. How exactly is any of that serving the pack? Roran's face went pale, then red. I never ordered anyone to kill her. You didn't stop it either. How would I have known? Because you wanted it to happen. Darius's voice dropped lower, harder. You wanted her gone, one way or another. So you created an environment where wolves felt empowered to take matters into their own hands. You're out of line. Someone needs to be. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. For the first time in 5 years, Darius didn't drop his gaze first, didn't defer, didn't back down. Roran noticed. His hand curled into a fist at his side. Stand down, Beta. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Roran's alpha presence flooded the room, pressing against Darius with crushing force. It was the kind of dominance display that should have driven any beta to their knees, forced submission through sheer overwhelming power. Darius felt it wash over him like water, and stood firm. Roran's expression shifted from anger to confusion to something that might have been fear. What? How are you? You're not as strong as you think you are, Darius said quietly. You never were. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Before Darius could answer, the door burst open. Sarah stood there, her face flushed, her breathing fast. The Northern Patrol, she gasped out. They're back early, and they brought someone. Roran's attention snapped to her. Who? I don't know, but they said it's urgent, said you need to see this. Roran pushed past Darius without another word, heading for the door. Darius followed, their confrontation temporarily suspended. Outside, the Northern Patrol had assembled in the square. 6 wolves, all looking grim and unsettled. And in the center of their loose circle, held firmly by 2 of the guards, was a stranger. A woman, maybe 40, with graying hair and scars that spoke of a hard life. She wore traveling clothes, dusty and worn, and she watched Roran approach with eyes that held no fear, only calculation. Who are you? Roran demanded. My name is Vera, the woman said, her voice rough but clear. I'm a scout from the Blackwater Pack. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd. Blackwater was 3 territories north, a large pack known for aggressive expansion and political maneuvering. They'd been pushing south for years, absorbing smaller packs, consolidating power. What do you want? Roran asked. I'm here with a message from my alpha. Vera straightened despite the guard's grip. He's heard interesting rumors about Ironvale, about instability, leadership changes. A rejected mate whose bond wouldn't break. Darius felt his stomach drop. News traveled fast between packs, but this was too fast. Someone had talked. Someone had spread the story beyond Ironvale's borders. Those are just rumors, Roran said, his voice hard. Are they? Vera smiled slightly. My alpha doesn't think so. He thinks Ironvale is weak right now, vulnerable, and he's wondering if perhaps this territory might benefit from new management. The crowd erupted in angry mutters. Wolves bristled, their hackles rising at the implied threat. You come into my territory, Roran said, his voice dropping dangerously low, and threaten me? In front of my pack? I'm not threatening. I'm delivering a message. Vera's calm never wavered. My alpha will be here in 3 days. He's bringing his council and his best fighters. He's offering Ironvale a choice. Submit peacefully and join Blackwater, or resist and be absorbed by force. Get out! Roran's power flooded the square, pressing against everyone present. Get out of my territory before I tear your throat out myself. Vera nodded to the guards holding her. You'll let me go? You have until sunset to reach the border. After that, you're fair game. The guards released her. Vera rolled her shoulders, working out the stiffness, then met Roran's eyes one last time. 3 days, Alpha. Think carefully about your answer. She turned and walked away, moving through the hostile crowd with the confidence of someone who knew she was untouchable. No one stopped her. No one dared. The moment she disappeared into the forest, the square exploded with noise. Wolves shouting, arguing, demanding action. Roran stood at the center of it, his face a mask of fury and something else. Fear. Because Vera was right. Ironvale was vulnerable right now. The pack was unsettled, questioning, divided, and a determined aggressor could exploit that weakness easily. Everyone shut up! Roran's command cut through the chaos. We're not submitting to anyone. Blackwater wants a fight? We'll give them one. With what? Someone called from the crowd. Half our hunters are injured from that last territorial dispute. We're already stretched thin. Then we'll call in allies, Roran shot back. Reach out to the packs we have treaties with. Those treaties were built on showing strength, Elder Garrett pointed out, pushing forward through the crowd. Right now we look weak. Why would anyone help us? Because, Roran started, then seemed to run out of words. Darius watched this unfold with a sinking feeling. This was bad. Worse than bad. If Blackwater attacked now, Ironvale might actually fall, and everything he and Kayla had planned would be for nothing. The bond pulsed in the back of his mind. Kayla, miles away, likely sensing his distress through their connection. He pushed a thought toward her. We have a problem. Her response came immediately, clear as if she'd spoken aloud. I'm coming back. No, too dangerous. 3 days, you said? Yes. Then we have 3 days to fix this. Before Darius could respond, Moira's voice rang out across the square. There is another option, the old woman said, her cane tapping as she moved to the center of the crowd. One you're all too proud to consider. What option? Roran demanded. Moira turned to look directly at Darius. We challenge for new leadership. The square went dead silent. What? Roran's voice was barely a whisper. You heard me. Moira's gaze didn't waver from Darius. The beta challenges the alpha. If Darius wins, he leads us through this crisis. If he loses, we follow your plan. That's insane, Sarah hissed. Darius would never... Wouldn't he? Moira finally looked at Roran. You've been alpha for 6 years. In that time, we've lost territory, lost allies, and now we're about to lose our independence. Maybe it's time for a change. Wolves were looking at Darius now, their expressions ranging from shocked to thoughtful to hopeful. He could feel their attention like a physical weight, could sense them measuring him against Roran, comparing. Darius. Roran's voice shook slightly. Tell them you're loyal. Darius met his alpha's eyes and saw the desperation there, saw Roran finally understanding that something had fundamentally changed, even if he couldn't identify what. This was the moment. The choice. Darius could back down, deny everything, and watch Ironvale potentially fall to Blackwater under Roran's failing leadership. Or he could step forward and take what was already his by right. The bond hummed with Kayla's presence, her power flowing through him, making him strong enough to do what needed to be done. "No," Darius said quietly. Roran flinched like he'd been struck. "No?" Sarah shrieked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean Moira's right." Darius stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silent square. "I challenge Roran for Alpha, tomorrow at dawn. Let the pack decide who leads them through this." The crowd erupted. Some wolves cheered, others shouted protests. Elder Garrett looked stunned. Moira smiled grimly, and Roran just stared at his beta, his former beta, with an expression of utter betrayal. "You," Roran breathed. "You planned this. From the beginning." "No," Darius said honestly, "but I'm finishing it." Roran's fist connected with Darius's jaw before anyone could blink. The crack echoed across the square, and Darius stumbled back, tasting copper. The crowd gasped, some surging forward, others pulling back to give them space. "Traitor!" Roran's voice was raw, animal. He lunged again, but this time Darius was ready. He caught Roran's wrist mid-swing and twisted, forcing the Alpha down to one knee. "Not here," Darius said through gritted teeth. "Dawn, like I said. Screw Dawn." Roran wrenched free, his eyes already shifting to amber, his wolf clawing at the surface. "You want to challenge me? We settle this now." "Enough!" Elder Moira's cane slammed against the wooden platform with surprising force. "Both of you, stand down. A formal challenge follows formal rules. You fight at dawn, in the arena, with the full pack as witness. Not like common thugs in the middle of the square." Roran's chest heaved, his whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. For a moment, Darius thought he might ignore Moira entirely and shift right there. But Sarah's hand on his arm seemed to ground him, pull him back from the edge. "Fine," Roran spat. "Dawn, but when I'm done with you, there won't be enough left to bury." He turned and stalked toward the Great Hall, Sarah hurrying after him. The crowd parted like water, nobody stupid enough to get in his way. Darius stood in the center of the square, his jaw already swelling, and felt the weight of 200 stares pressing against him. Some wolves looked excited, bloodthirsty even. Others looked worried. A few, mostly the older ones, looked resigned, like they'd seen this story play out before, and knew how it ended. "Well," Elder Garrett said, moving to stand beside Moira. "That was dramatic." "Necessary," Moira corrected. "This pack has been limping along for too long. Time to either heal or die properly." "You really think the beta can win?" "He's not just a beta anymore." Moira's eyes tracked Darius as he made his way toward the edge of the square. "Haven't you noticed? The way wolves move around him now, the way they listen?" Garrett frowned, then looked around at the assembled pack. His frown deepened. "Something's different. Something's very different." Moira tapped her cane thoughtfully. "The question is whether anyone else figures it out before morning." Darius didn't hear their conversation. He was already pushing through the crowd, ignoring the questions being thrown at him, the hands reaching out to touch his shoulder or grab his arm. He needed to get away, needed space to think. The forest called to him, dark and quiet. He headed for the tree line, his pace quickening until he was running, his boots pounding against frozen earth. The bond pulsed stronger with each step north, drawing him toward Kayla like a compass pointing home. He found her camp just as the last light bled from the sky. She'd built a small fire in a natural depression, hidden from casual view, and she sat cross-legged beside it, sharpening a hunting knife. She looked up as he approached, and her expression shifted from calm to concerned in an instant. "Let me see," she said, setting down the knife and rising in one fluid motion. He sat on a fallen log near the fire, tilting his head so she could examine his jaw. Her fingers were gentle but thorough, probing the bruised flesh. "Not broken," she said finally, "but you'll have a hell of a bruise." "Worth it." "Is it?" She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You challenged him, in front of everyone." "Didn't have much choice. Blackwater's coming. 3 days. Kayla went very still. "You're serious." "They sent a scout, made it very clear that they see weakness, and they're planning to exploit it." He turned to look at her properly. "This isn't just about Roran anymore. If I don't win tomorrow, Ironvale might not survive the week. If you don't win, you'll be dead." "There's that too." She punched his shoulder, not playfully, hard enough to hurt. This isn't funny, Darius. Alpha challenges are fights to the death. Submission isn't enough. One of you has to die. I know. And you think you can kill him? The question hung in the cold air between them. Darius had been asking himself the same thing since the words left his mouth in the square. Could he actually kill Roran? The man he'd served for 5 years, fought beside, protected? I don't know, he admitted. But I know I can't let him keep leading. Not now, not with Blackwater breathing down our necks. Kayla was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. The flames cast shadows across her face, making her look older, harder. You're going to need more than just strength tomorrow. What do you mean? Roran's going to fight dirty. He always does when he's cornered. She reached for a stick and poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. He'll try to shake you psychologically before the physical fight even starts. Make you doubt yourself, make the pack doubt you. How? By exposing the bond. Darius felt his stomach drop. He doesn't know about the bond. Not yet, but he's not stupid. She met his eyes. He knows something changed. He can feel the difference in his own power, even if he doesn't understand why. And he's had 3 days to think about it, to put pieces together. You think he's figured it out? I think he's close. And tomorrow, in front of the whole pack, he's going to make you explain where your new strength came from. She leaned back, her expression troubled. When he does, what are you going to say? It was a good question, a terrifying question, because the truth that Kayla had been amplifying Roran's power for years, and now she was amplifying Darius instead, would shake Ironvale to its foundation. It would mean admitting that their alpha had been artificially strengthened, that his authority was built on a lie. But lying wouldn't work either. The pack could sense the bond between him and Kayla, even if they didn't consciously recognize what it was. Their wolves knew. And wolves didn't lie. I'll tell them the truth, Darius said finally. That's suicide. Maybe. But it's the only option that doesn't make me exactly like Roran. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. He built his leadership on deception, on taking credit for power that wasn't really his. I won't do the same. Kayla looked down at their joined hands, something complicated moving across her face. You're too honest for your own good. Someone once told me that honesty was the only real strength. He smiled slightly, right before she broke an unbreakable bond and changed everything. I don't remember saying that. You didn't have to. She squeezed his hand, then stood and moved to her pack, rummaging through it. When she turned back, she held a small vial filled with dark liquid. What is that? Darius asked. Insurance. She uncorked the vial, and the sharp scent of herbs hit his nose, bitter and medicinal. It'll dull pain, sharpen reflexes, keep you fighting even when you should be down. Old recipe from my grandmother. Is it safe? Define safe. She offered the vial. It won't kill you, but it'll make tomorrow hurt less, maybe enough less to keep you alive. Darius took the vial, studying the dark liquid. You've been planning for this. I've been planning for a lot of things. She sat back down beside him, closer this time. Tomorrow's just one of them. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, one of the patrols marking territory. The sound was lonely and defiant at the same time. I should head back, Darius said eventually. Need to be ready before dawn. Stay. Kayla's voice was quiet but firm. You'll fight better rested. And there's nothing back in Ironvale except Roran planning how to kill you. She wasn't wrong, and the thought of spending his potentially last night alone in his quarters, staring at the ceiling and counting the hours, made his chest tight. Okay, he said. They banked the fire and settled against the log, Kayla's head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The bond hummed contentedly between them, warm and steady. For the first time in days, Darius felt something close to peace. I'm sorry, Kayla said into the darkness. For what? For dragging you into this. For making you the target. If I just left quietly, none of this would be happening. If you'd left quietly, Roran would still be a terrible alpha, and Blackwater would still be coming. The only difference is, I wouldn't have the strength to stop them. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. Why? Because someone had to. And because he paused, trying to find the right words. Because the first time I saw you, really saw you, was 3 years ago at the Harvest Festival. You were standing at the edge of the dancing, watching everyone else have fun, and you looked so sad. And I thought someone should ask her to dance. Someone should make her smile. You didn't ask me to dance. I was a coward. You were already bonded to Roran, and I was his beta, and crossing that line seemed impossible. He tightened his arm around her. But I've regretted it every day since. So no, you didn't drag me into anything. I've been falling into this for 3 years. Just took me a while to admit it. Kayla turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that reflected the last of the firelight. If you die tomorrow, I'm going to be furious with you. Noted. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and he kissed her back like a drowning man finding air. The bond flared between them, power surging and settling, and for just a moment everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kayla rested her forehead against his. Don't die, she whispered. I'll do my best. Dawn came too fast and too cold. Darius woke to Kayla shaking his shoulder, the sky just starting to lighten from black to deep purple. Time to go, she said, already dressed and packed. He sat up, his body protesting every movement. His jaw throbbed where Roran had hit him, and new tension had settled into his shoulders overnight. Perfect condition for a fight to the death. Kayla handed him the vial from last night. Drink half now. Save the rest for when you really need it. He obeyed, and the liquid burned going down, tasting like medicine and rotted leaves. But almost immediately, warmth spread through his chest, and the throbbing in his jaw dulled to a manageable ache. Wow, he said, his voice rough. Told you. She helped him to his feet. Come on, you can't be late to your own execution. Encouraging. I'm a realist. They made their way back to Ironvale as the sun crept above the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, if you ignored the fact that Darius might not live to see sunset. The pack had already gathered at the arena, a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside at the edge of the territory. Wolves lined the slopes, hundreds of them, all waiting in tense silence. At the center of the flat fighting ground, Roran stood shirtless despite the cold, his muscles already shifting beneath his skin as his wolf pushed close to the surface. Sarah stood with the elders at the edge of the arena, her arms crossed, her expression smug. She thought this was already over, thought Darius was walking to his death. Maybe he was. Darius stopped at the tree line, and Kayla gripped his arm once, hard. Remember what I said. He'll try to shake you first. Don't let him. I won't. And Darius? She waited until he looked at her. The bond works both ways. If you need strength, pull from it. Pull from me. He nodded once, then stepped out of the forest. The crowd's murmur rose as he appeared, wolves pointing and whispering. He walked down the slope into the arena, stripping off his shirt as he went, and stopped about 10 feet from Roran. You came, Roran said, his voice carrying in the cold morning air. Part of me thought you'd run. I'm not you. Roran's eyes flashed. No, you're worse. At least I was honest about what I wanted. You've been scheming behind my back for who knows how long. 3 days, Darius said. That's how long I've been planning to challenge you. Everything before that was me being loyal while you tore this pack apart. Loyal? Roran laughed, the sound bitter. You took my mate. The crowd went dead silent. Every wolf froze, their attention snapping between the two men. Darius felt his pulse spike but kept his expression neutral. You rejected her, in front of everyone. And somehow, impossibly, she ended up bonded to you instead. Roran started circling, and Darius turned to keep him in view. You know what I think? I think she never really severed the bond with me. I think you two conspired to fake it, to make me look weak. The bond broke, Darius said. You felt it break. I felt something, but was it really the bond, or just her pulling back, hiding what was really happening? Roran's voice rose, playing to the crowd now. She had some kind of power over me. I can admit that now. And the moment she left, that power vanished. Where did it go, Darius? Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. They were listening, thinking, starting to put pieces together. Tell them, Roran demanded. Tell them about the bond you formed with her. Tell them how you stole my mate and my strength in one move. Darius could lie, could deny it, call Roran paranoid, desperate. But Kayla was right. Wolves didn't lie. And building his leadership on deception would make him no better than the man he was trying to replace. You're right, Darius said, his voice clear and steady. Kayla and I are bonded. The crowd erupted. Wolves shouted, arguing, some sounding outraged, others confused. Sarah screamed something incoherent, her face purple with rage. The elders looked stunned. But, Darius continued, raising his voice to cut through the noise, you're wrong about everything else. How am I wrong? Roran snarled. You just admitted. Kayla didn't give me your strength. She gave me hers. Darius turned slowly, addressing the entire pack now. Kayla has a gift, a rare ability to amplify the dominance of her mate. For 3 years she amplified you, Roran, made you stronger than you had any right to be, and you never even knew. Roran's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. It's true. Ask yourself why you felt weaker these past few days. Why your commands don't hit as hard. Why wolves hesitate before following your orders. Darius took a step forward. It's because the power was never really yours. It was hers, channeled through you, and when she left, she took it with her. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. That's insane, Sarah shouted from the sideline. Why would she waste her power on him for 3 years if she could have? Because I loved him, Kayla's voice rang out. Every head turned. She stood at the top of the arena, silhouetted against the rising sun, her chin raised in defiance. I loved him, she repeated, descending the slope. And I thought if I made him strong enough, confident enough, he'd become the leader Ironvale deserved. But strength without wisdom is just violence, and no amount of amplification could fix what was broken inside him. She reached the arena floor and moved to stand beside Darius, facing Roran across the fighting ground. So yes, she said, I broke our bond. And yes, I formed a new one with Darius, because he's already what you pretended to be. Roran stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Rage, hurt, disbelief. You used me. No, I tried to save you. Her voice softened slightly. But you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. This is all lies, Roran said, but his voice lacked conviction. He could feel it now, could sense the truth in what they were saying, could finally understand why he'd felt so diminished lately. Then let the fight prove it, Elder Moira called from her position with the other elders. If Darius truly carries Kayla's amplification, his strength will show it. If not, Roran will kill him easily, and this will all be revealed as deception. Roran's eyes locked onto Darius, and something shifted in his expression. The confusion burned away, leaving only cold fury. You took everything from me. You threw it away, Darius corrected. I just picked it up. Roran's shift started before he'd finished speaking. His body contorted, bones breaking and reforming, fur erupting across his skin. In seconds, a massive gray wolf stood where the man had been, lips pulled back from fangs that could tear through steel. Darius felt his own shift rising in response, the wolf inside him eager for this confrontation. But he held it back just for a moment, meeting Roran's wolf eyes with his human ones. I'm sorry, he said quietly, knowing Roran could still understand. I'm sorry it came to this. Then he let go, and the shift took him. The transformation was agony and ecstasy, his human form dissolving into something larger, stronger, more primal. When it finished, he stood on 4 legs, his pelt black as midnight, his body thrumming with power that felt both foreign and right. The bond sang between him and Kayla, and he felt her strength pouring into him, magnifying everything he was. Roran attacked first, crossing the distance between them in a blur of gray fur and snapping jaws. Darius dodged, his enhanced reflexes making Roran's movement seem almost slow. He countered with a slash of his claws that caught Roran's shoulder, drawing first blood. The crowd roared. They circled each other, both wolves looking for openings. Roran was bigger, had more experience fighting in wolf form, but Darius was faster, stronger, the amplification making him something beyond what any normal beta should be. Roran lunged again, and this time Darius met him head-on. They collided in a tangle of fur and fangs, rolling across the arena floor. Darius felt teeth sink into his foreleg and wrenched free, leaving skin behind. He retaliated with a bite to Roran's ear that tore it half off. Blood stained the frozen earth. They broke apart, both panting, both bleeding. Roran's eyes held something new now. Not just rage, but fear. He was finally understanding that he might actually lose this. "Kill him!" Sarah shrieked from the sideline. "Kill him now!" But Roran hesitated, and in that hesitation, Darius saw his opening. He feinted left, then drove right, his jaws closing around Roran's throat. Not hard enough to kill, not yet. Just enough to hold him, to force him down. Roran thrashed, trying to break free, but Darius's grip was iron. The amplified strength made holding him almost easy, and slowly, inevitably, Roran's struggles weakened. This was it. The moment. Darius could feel Roran's pulse against his tongue, could sense the life beating there, fragile and temporary. One hard bite and it would be over. His wolf demanded it. The fight demanded it. Pack law demanded it. But something in Darius hesitated. Roran had been his friend once, his alpha. They'd fought together, bled together, protected Ironvale together. And yes, Roran had made terrible choices lately, had let power corrupt him, had rejected Kayla and nearly destroyed the pack in the process. But did that mean he deserved to die? Darius felt Kayla through the bond, felt her silent support, whatever he chose. This was his decision, his burden. He thought about what Moira had said, that challenge fights were to the death, that submission wasn't enough. But Moira was old-fashioned, and Darius was trying to build something new. He released Roran's throat and stepped back, shifting to human form as he went. The transformation left him naked and bleeding in the cold morning air, but he stood straight despite the pain. Roran shifted back too, collapsing to his hands and knees, gasping for breath. Blood ran from the wound on his shoulder, the torn ear, a dozen other injuries. "Submit," Darius said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. Roran looked up at him, his eyes full of hate and shame and something that might have been relief. "I submit," he rasped. The crowd erupted into chaos. Half the pack was shouting in approval, the other half in outrage. Wolves surged forward, some trying to reach Darius, others pulling them back. The elders stood frozen in shock. This wasn't how challenges ended. Ever. "This is against pack law." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, shrill with panic. "He has to kill him. He has to." "No." Elder Moira's cane cracked against stone, the sound somehow audible over the riot. "He doesn't." Everyone turned to stare at her. "The law states that a challenge ends when one wolf can no longer fight," Moira continued, her ancient eyes sharp. Roran submitted. "The fight is over. Darius wins." "That's not—" Sarah started, but Elder Garrett cut her off. "She's right," he said gruffly. "The death usually happens because alphas are too proud to submit. But if submission is given freely, the challenge is satisfied." "This is insane," Sarah hissed, rounding on the gathered wolves. "Are you all just going to accept this? He's a traitor. He stole Roran's mate, his power—" "He didn't steal anything I didn't give him," Kayla said, moving to stand beside Darius. She pulled off her jacket and draped it around his shoulders, covering his nakedness. The gesture was intimate, possessive, and it made Sarah's face go red. "You ruined everything," Sarah spat at her. "You and your unnatural bond. You should have just died when Roran rejected you, like a normal wolf." "Careful." Darius's voice was quiet, but it carried weight now, an alpha's weight. "You're talking to my mate." The words hung in the cold air. His mate. Not Roran's discarded Luna, not the strange woman with the impossible bond, his. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. She turned to Roran, still kneeling in the blood-stained dirt. "Say something. Don't just kneel there like what?" Roran's voice was hoarse, broken. "Like the loser I am?" He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Blood dripped from his injuries, but he ignored it, his eyes fixed on Darius. "You spared me." "Yes." "Why?" Darius considered the question. Because mercy was strength? Because killing Roran wouldn't change what happened? Because somewhere under all the pride and poor choices, there was still the wolf who'd once been a decent leader? "Because Ironvale has lost enough already," Darius said finally. And because we're going to need every fighter we have when Blackwater arrives. That sobered the crowd. The shouting died down as wolves remembered the real threat. Not internal power struggles, but an invasion set to arrive in less than 3 days. He's right. Elder Chen spoke for the first time, her soft voice somehow carrying. We have a bigger problem than who leads. We have survival. Exactly. Darius turned to address the full pack, ignoring the way his wounds throbbed, the way exhaustion pulled at him. Blackwater is coming because they think we're weak, divided, easy prey. We just spent the last 20 minutes proving them right. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the assembled wolves. But we're not weak, Darius continued. We're Ironvale. We've held this territory for 3 generations. We've survived harsh winters, territorial disputes, human expansion. We've survived because when it mattered, we stood together. Pretty speech, someone called from the crowd. Marcus, looking sullen. But what's your actual plan, Beta? Alpha, Elder Moira corrected sharply. He won the challenge. Show respect. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. What's your plan, Alpha? The title felt strange in Darius's mouth, too big, too heavy, but he wore it anyway. First, we send a message to Blackwater. Let them know leadership has changed and we're not interested in their offer. They won't care, another wolf called out. They want the territory, not a negotiation. Maybe, but we make them care. Darius looked to Elder Garrett. How many allied packs do we have treaties with? 4, but like I said before, those treaties were built on showing strength. Then we show strength. We reach out today, tell them we've had a leadership change, we're consolidating, and we're calling in the alliance if Blackwater attacks. Elder Chen nodded slowly. It might work. Blackwater won't want a multi-pack war. What about internally? This from an older hunter named Darren, one of Roran's longtime supporters. Half the pack still thinks you're a traitor. How are you going to lead when nobody trusts you? Fair question. Brutally fair. Darius met Darren's eyes. I'm going to be honest about everything. About Kayla's ability, about how it works, about what I plan to do with it. He gestured to Kayla. She's not a secret weapon. She's my mate and my partner. And yes, she amplifies my dominance. But that doesn't make my decisions for me. It doesn't make me a puppet. How do we know that? Darren challenged. You don't. Not yet. Darius straightened, letting his new alpha presence roll out across the arena. He felt it now, felt how the bond magnified what was already there, took his natural leadership and made it undeniable. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it. 3 days. Let me lead us through this crisis. If I fail, if Blackwater takes the territory, you can throw me to them personally. Some wolves laughed nervously at that. Others just looked thoughtful. And what about him? Sarah, one of Marcus's companions from the forest ambush, pointed at Roran. What happens to the old alpha? All eyes turned to Roran. He stood alone now, Sarah having backed away during Darius's speech, her attention flickering between him and the exits like she was calculating escape routes. That's up to him, Darius said. He can stay as a pack member, help defend Ironvale, or he can leave. You'd just let me walk away? Roran's voice was hollow. Yes. After everything? After everything. Roran stared at him for a long moment, something complicated working behind his eyes. I don't understand you. I know. You should have killed me. It would have been cleaner, made a stronger statement. Probably, Darius shrugged. But I'm not trying to lead through fear. We've had enough of that. The barb landed. Roran flinched, but didn't argue. He looked down at his hands, at the blood still dripping from his injuries, and something in his expression shifted. Not acceptance, not quite, but maybe the beginning of understanding. I'll stay, Roran said quietly. For now. For Ironvale. Good. Darius nodded once, then turned back to the crowd. Anyone else have questions? Concerns? Now's the time. Silence. Wolves exchanged glances, but nobody spoke up. Then we have work to do. Darius started issuing orders, his voice strong despite his exhaustion. Marcus, take a group and patrol the southern border. I want to know the second Blackwater moves. Darren, you're in charge of inventory, weapons, food, medical supplies. Elder Garrett, start reaching out to our allies. Elder Chen, I need you to work with the healers, make sure we're prepared for wounded. People started moving, responding to his commands with the automatic obedience that came from years of pack structure. They might not trust him yet, might not even like him, but they obeyed. That was a start. Kayla touched his arm gently. "You're bleeding all over the place." He looked down. She was right. His foreleg, now his arm, had deep puncture wounds from Roran's teeth, and his shoulder was torn where he'd taken a bad hit. The cold had numbed most of the pain, but now that the adrenaline was fading, he felt every injury. "Healers," Kayla said, not a suggestion. "In a minute. Now." She caught Elder Moira's eye, and the old woman nodded, already moving to help organize the dispersing crowd. Kayla steered Darius toward the healer's station, a long building near the great hall that smelled of herbs and antiseptic. Inside, 3 healers were already preparing supplies, anticipating wounded from the challenge. The head healer, a middle-aged woman named Iris, took one look at Darius and pointed to a cot. "Sit, and try not to bleed on my clean floor." He sat. Kayla perched beside him, her hand finding his uninjured one and squeezing. Iris worked in efficient silence, cleaning wounds, stitching the worst of them, applying salves that stung like fire. Darius gritted his teeth and endured it, too tired to do much else. "You were stupid," Iris said conversationally as she worked on his shoulder, "fighting him in wolf form when you've barely practiced shape-shifting in combat. Seemed like the right move at the time. Seemed like a good way to get yourself killed." She pulled a stitch tight, and Darius hissed, "But you won, so I suppose my opinion doesn't matter." "Your opinion always matters, Iris." She paused, meeting his eyes. Something in her expression softened slightly. "Well, try not to need me again so soon. I'm getting old for all-day wound duty." "I'll do my best." She finished bandaging him up and stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. "You'll live. Probably. Don't shift for at least 2 days or you'll tear all my stitches." "Understood." Iris nodded and moved to help one of the other healers with supplies. Kayla waited until she was out of earshot, then leaned close. "That was terrifying," she murmured. "Which part?" "All of it, but especially the part where his teeth were in your throat, and I thought you were going to die right there in front of everyone." "But I didn't." "No thanks to your survival instincts." She pressed her forehead against his, careful of his injuries. "Don't do that to me again. I'll try to avoid life-or-death combat." "Good plan." They sat like that for a moment, just breathing together, the bond humming contentedly between them. Outside, they could hear the pack mobilizing, following Darius's orders, preparing for what was coming. "Do you think they'll really fight for you?" Kayla asked quietly. "When Blackwater comes?" "I don't know. Some will. Others might just watch to see who wins." He pulled back to look at her. "But I had to try. Had to show them there was another way besides Roran's. And if it doesn't work, then we run. Together. Find another pack. Another territory." He managed a tired smile. "I hear the western forests are nice this time of year." She laughed, the sound slightly watery. "You're terrible at contingency planning. One of my many flaws." The door banged open and Darius tensed, half expecting trouble. But it was just Elder Moira, her cane tapping against the floorboards. "Good. You're not dead," she said by way of greeting. "We need to talk strategy." Darius pushed himself to his feet, ignoring Kayla's protest. "What's the situation?" "Mixed. About 60% of the pack has accepted the leadership change. The other 40% is skeptical." Moira settled into a chair with a grateful sigh. "Roran's loyalists are the biggest problem. They're not openly rebellious yet, but they're not happy." "What about Sarah?" "Disappeared. Probably went to her family's cabin to sulk." Moira waved a dismissive hand. "She's not important. What's important is Blackwater." "Elder Garrett sent the messages?" "Yes. But here's the problem. Blackwater has already started moving. Our scouts report at least 50 wolves heading this way, maybe more." Darius felt his stomach drop. "How long?" 2 days. They'll be at our border day after tomorrow at dawn." So much for 3 days. Blackwater was moving faster than their scout had indicated, probably hoping to catch Ironvale unprepared. "Response from our allies?" Darius asked. "Stone Peak will send 20 fighters. Riverbend is sending 15. The others are still deciding." Moira's expression was grim. "Even with support, we're outnumbered." Then we need to be smarter, not stronger. Darius moved to the window, looking out at Ironvale. Wolves moved through the streets with purpose now, preparing, organizing. His wolves, his pack. What's our strongest defensive position? The northern pass. It's narrow, rocky, forces any attacking force into a bottleneck. Then that's where we make our stand. He turned back to face her. Pull everyone back to defensive positions. Set up barriers, traps, anything that gives us an advantage. You're planning to hold them at the pass? I'm planning to make them think attacking Ironvale will cost more than it's worth. He started pacing, his mind racing. Blackwater wants easy territory. They want weak wolves they can absorb without a real fight. So we show them we're not weak. Show them that taking this land will break them. Moira watched him pace, her expression thoughtful. You know, you're different than I expected. How so? Most new alphas would be focused on shows of strength, dominance displays, making sure everyone knows who's in charge. She leaned back in her chair. But you're thinking about the pack first, about survival. Isn't that what an alpha is supposed to do? In theory. In practice, most of them are too busy protecting their ego to protect their people. She smiled slightly. It's refreshing, assuming it doesn't get us all killed. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Don't mention it. She pushed herself to her feet. I'll spread the word about defensive positions. You should rest while you can. The next 2 days are going to be brutal. She was right, but Darius knew he wouldn't rest. Couldn't. There was too much to do, too many pieces to move into place. Kayla must have read his expression because she sighed. You're going to ignore the healer's advice and work yourself into the ground, aren't you? Probably. At least let me help. You've done enough. Darius. She stood facing him squarely. I'm not some delicate thing that needs protecting. I survived 3 years as Roran's mate. I survived a public rejection that should have killed me. I survived a forest ambush and broke an impossible bond. Her eyes blazed. I can help defend my territory. He felt a surge of affection mixed with awe. She was right. She was so much stronger than anyone gave her credit for, including him. Okay, he said. Here's what I need. The next 2 days blurred together in a chaos of preparation. Darius barely slept, moving between defensive positions, checking supplies, organizing patrols. Every decision felt weighted with potential disaster, every choice critical. The pack responded better than he'd expected. Even some of Roran's former loyalists threw themselves into preparations, recognizing that pack survival outweighed personal politics. Darren turned out to be invaluable with logistics, coordinating food stores and weapon distribution. Marcus, despite his earlier hostility, led the southern patrols with dedication. And Roran worked quietly alongside everyone else, taking orders without complaint. He didn't seek Darius out, didn't try to offer advice or reclaim authority. He just worked, and slowly, incrementally, the pack stopped looking at him with pity and started seeing him as just another wolf. Kayla was everywhere, helping with fortifications, organizing the non-fighters, working with the healers. She and Darius crossed paths dozens of times each day, sharing quick updates, stolen moments of contact. The bond between them strengthened with each interaction, and Darius found himself drawing on her presence when exhaustion threatened to drag him under. On the second evening, as the sun set blood-red over the mountains, Darius stood at the northern pass and surveyed their preparations. They'd built barriers across the narrow passage, stacked rocks to create cover, dug pits and covered them with branches. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. Impressive work, the voice came from behind him. Darius turned to find Roran standing a few feet away, his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked smaller somehow, diminished not just by the loss of Kayla's amplification, but by something else. Humility, maybe. What do you want? Darius asked, not unkindly. To help. Actually help, not just exist. Roran moved closer, studying the defensive positions. I know these mountains better than anyone. I've been alpha here for 6 years. Let me use that knowledge. Darius considered refusing, considered keeping Roran at a distance, minimizing his influence. But that would be pride talking, not strategy. Okay, he said. Show me. Roran's eyebrows rose slightly, like he'd expected rejection, but he recovered quickly, pointing to various positions. The eastern cliff face. You've got it marked as stable, but it's not. Heavy pressure and it'll collapse. Could work in our favor if we bait them into positioning there. Go on. They spent the next hour going over the terrain, Roran pointing out weaknesses and opportunities that Darius had missed. It was strange working together like this, but effective. Roran knew this land intimately, and his tactical mind, one of the things that had made him alpha in the first place, was sharp when not clouded by ego. "Why are you helping?" Darius asked as they finished up. Roran was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because I finally understand what I lost. Not the power. I mean, yes, that hurts. But the real loss was Kayla." He looked at Darius. "I had someone who believed in me enough to make me better than I was. And I threw it away because I was too stupid to see what she was giving me." "She did love you," Darius said, "for a long time." "I know. That makes it worse." Roran's smile was bitter. "But you saw what I couldn't. You valued her when I took her for granted. You're a better alpha than I ever was, and a better mate than I deserve to be." The admission hung between them, heavy with sincerity. "I don't know if I'm better," Darius said honestly. "Just different." "That's enough." Roran turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'll fight for you tomorrow. For Ironvale. Maybe it'll make up for some of what I broke." He walked away before Darius could respond. Kayla found Darius an hour later, still standing at the pass, watching the last light fade from the sky. "You should sleep," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "So should you." "I will, when you do." She rested her cheek against his back. "They'll be here by morning." "I know." "Are we ready?" "As ready as we can be." He turned in her arms, looking down at her face in the gathering darkness. "Kayla, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we'll face it together." She pressed her palm over his heart. "That's what the bond means. Not just power, not just amplification, partnership, you and me, no matter what comes." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, trying to pour 3 years of unspoken feelings into the contact. She kissed him back just as fiercely, the bond flaring between them like a star. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it before. Should have. You're saying it now. That's what matters." She smiled up at him. "I love you too. Have for a while, if I'm honest." "How long?" "Since the Harvest Festival, 3 years ago. You looked at me like I was a person, not just Roran's mate. Nobody else did that." "I almost asked you to dance that night." "I know. I was waiting for you to." Her smile turned sad, but then the moment passed and I thought I'd imagined it. "Not imagined, just delayed." He kissed her forehead. "When this is over, I'm taking you dancing, properly. I'm going to hold you to that." They stood together in the darkness, the bond humming between them, and for just a moment, everything else fell away. No invasion, no Pax politics, no threat on the horizon, just the two of them and the choice they'd made to stand together. Then dawn came. The Blackwater wolves appeared at the border as the sun crept above the mountains, a wall of fur and teeth and hostile intent. Darius stood at the head of his defenses, Kayla on his right, Roran on his left, and the full strength of Ironvale at his back. The Blackwater Alpha, a massive brute named Cade, stepped forward, his lips pulled back in something that might have been a smile. "I heard Ironvale had new leadership," Cade called across the pass. "Wanted to see if it was true." "It's true," Darius called back, his voice steady. "And you think that changes anything?" "I think it changes everything." Darius let his amplified presence roll out, let the Blackwater wolves feel the weight of it. "You came here expecting weakness, expected an easy fight. But Ironvale stands stronger than ever." Cade's smile faltered slightly. He could feel it too, the power radiating from Darius, the unified front of the defending wolves. This wasn't what his scout had described. "Last chance," Cade said. "Submit now and join us peacefully. Fight, and we'll take the territory anyway." "Your choice." Darius felt the pack behind him, felt their readiness, their determination, felt Kayla's strength flowing through the bond, making him something more than he'd ever been alone. "We choose to fight," Darius said clearly, "and we choose to win." The Blackwater Alpha's expression darkened. He raised his hand, preparing to give the attack signal. And then a howl split the morning air. Everyone turned. From the eastern ridge, wolves appeared, the Stone Peak fighters, 20 strong. From the west, Riverbend's 15, and behind them, more. Wolves from packs. Darius hadn't even contacted, drawn by news of the challenge, by curiosity about Ironvale's new alpha. The reinforcements flooded down the slopes, taking positions behind Darius's defensive line. In minutes, the numerical advantage had shifted. Cade stared at the assembled force, his confidence visibly wavering. "Still think this will be easy?" Darius called. Cade's jaw worked. He looked at his wolves, then back at the defenders, calculating odds and costs. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then Cade lowered his hand. "Another time," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Enjoy your victory, new alpha. It won't last." He turned and signaled his wolves to retreat. They melted back into the forest, leaving the pass empty and Ironvale intact. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then someone, Darren, Darius thought, let out a whoop of triumph. The sound spread like wildfire, wolves howling and cheering, celebrating a battle won without a drop of blood spilled. Kayla grabbed Darius's face and kissed him hard, and he kissed her back, dizzy with relief and exhaustion and disbelief that it had actually worked. When they broke apart, he found the pack watching them, not with suspicion or doubt, but with something else. Acceptance, maybe even respect. Elder Moira pushed through the crowd, her cane tapping. "Not bad for your first week as alpha." "Thanks," Darius managed, still trying to process what just happened. "Don't let it go to your head." But she was smiling as she said it. Around them, wolves were already beginning to celebrate properly, passing around drinks, clapping each other on the back. The visiting packs mingled with Ironvale's wolves, swapping stories, making connections. Roran stood slightly apart from the revelry, watching with an unreadable expression. Darius caught his eye, and after a moment Roran nodded once. Not quite approval, but acknowledgement. A beginning. "Come on," Kayla said, tugging Darius toward the celebration. "You led them through this. The least you can do is celebrate with them." He let her pull him into the crowd, accepting congratulations, answering questions, slowly understanding that something fundamental had shifted. The pack didn't just accept him now. They believed in him. And for the first time since this entire mess started, Darius believed in himself too. The celebration lasted well into the afternoon, but Darius couldn't fully relax into it. He stood at the edge of the gathering, accepting congratulations and fielding questions from the visiting alphas, but part of his mind remained tactical, watching for problems that hadn't materialized yet. The Stone Peak Alpha, a grizzled woman named Marin, with scars crisscrossing her face, approached with 2 cups of something that smelled strongly of fermented berries. "Drink," she said, offering one. "You look like you need it." Darius took it gratefully and drained half in one swallow. It burned going down, but the warmth spread through his chest, easing some of the tension. "That was well played," Marin said, studying him with sharp eyes. "Making Blackwater think twice without actually fighting. Smart." "I got lucky." "No, you prepared, you positioned, and you called in allies. That's leadership, not luck." She took a sip of her own drink. "Your predecessor wouldn't have done it that way. Roran would have fought and lost, possibly gotten his whole pack killed in the process." Marin glanced toward where Roran stood alone near the tree line. "He was always too proud for his own good. You, though, you've got something different, something that might actually last." "Thanks, I think." She laughed, a rough bark of sound. "Take the compliment, pup. They're rare from me." She paused, her expression turning more serious. "But I didn't come just to flatter you. We need to talk alliances." "I thought we already had a treaty." "We had a treaty with Roran's Ironvale, old agreement built on old foundations." She met his eyes directly. "I want to rebuild it, properly, with you." Darius felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't just about defending against Blackwater. This was about the future, about building something stronger than what came before. "What did you have in mind?" They talked for nearly an hour, Marin laying out her vision for a proper alliance network, shared resources, coordinated patrols, mutual defense agreements that went beyond token gestures. Other alphas drifted over, adding their perspectives, and by the time the sun started sinking toward the horizon, Darius had the bones of something substantial, a coalition. Not just treaties on paper, but real cooperation. We'll formalize it in 2 weeks, Marin said finally. Give everyone time to bring it to their councils, work out details. But I think we've got something here. The other alphas nodded agreement and drifted away, leaving Darius alone with his thoughts and his half-empty cup. You look overwhelmed, Kayla said, appearing at his elbow like she'd materialized from the shadows. I am overwhelmed. I've been alpha for 3 days, and I'm already restructuring regional politics. Technically, you've been alpha for 2 days. The challenge was day 1.
That doesn't make it less overwhelming. She smiled and leaned against him, her warmth a comfort against the cooling evening air. You're doing fine. Better than fine. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go catastrophically wrong. Maybe nothing will. That doesn't sound like you. I'm trying optimism. She tilted her head to look up at him. How's it working? Terrifying. She laughed, and the sound made something in his chest loosen.
Around them, the celebration was winding down, visiting wolves preparing to depart, Ironvale's pack members drifting back toward the main settlement. The crisis had passed, and life was trying to return to normal. Whatever normal meant now. We should talk to Roran, Kayla said quietly. Darius followed her gaze to where the former alpha still stood alone, watching the celebration from a distance like a ghost observing the living. Why? Because this isn't resolved. Not really. She pulled away from him, her expression troubled. He helped today, gave you tactical advice, fought alongside everyone else. But he's still adrift, and we can't build a healthy pack with him haunting the edges. She was right. Darius had been so focused on immediate threats that he'd let the Roran problem simmer, hoping it would resolve itself. But wounds didn't heal without treatment, and the wound Roran represented, both to himself and the pack, needed addressing. Okay, Darius said. Let's talk to him. They found Roran exactly where they'd last seen him, leaning against a pine tree, his arms crossed, his expression distant. He didn't seem surprised when they approached. Come to gloat? He asked, but there was no heat in it, just weariness. No, Kayla said. We came to talk. Actually talk, not just exist around each other. Roran's jaw worked. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the rejection. I don't know what you want me to say. Start with the truth. She moved closer, her posture open but firm. How are you? Really? How do you think? The words came out sharper than probably intended. I lost everything. My mate, my position, my strength. I'm basically a nobody in the pack I used to lead. You're not a nobody, Darius said. You fought today. Help defend Ironvale, that counts. Does it? Roran laughed bitterly. I'm only here because you were merciful enough not to kill me. That's not respect, that's pity. It's a second chance, Kayla corrected. What you do with it is up to you. Roran looked between them, his expression raw. I don't know how to be anything except alpha. I've spent 6 years making every decision, controlling everything, and now, he gestured vaguely. Now I'm supposed to just follow orders? Take a subordinate role? I don't know if I can do that. Then leave, Darius said bluntly. I meant it when I said you could. If staying here is torture, if you can't accept the new structure, then go. Find another pack, start over somewhere else. You'd really let me go, just like that? Yes, because keeping you here against your will helps nobody. Darius stepped closer. But Roran, if you stay, you have to actually stay. Not just physically, but mentally. You have to accept that you're not alpha anymore and figure out who you are without that title. Roran was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know who that is. Then maybe it's time to find out, Kayla said gently. You spent 3 years being artificially strong because of me. Then you rejected me and lost that strength. But neither version was really you, was it? Just what you thought an alpha should be. So what? I'm supposed to go on some kind of journey of self-discovery? Roran's tone was mocking, but underneath it Darius heard genuine fear. Fear of irrelevance, of being ordinary. You're supposed to figure out what you actually want, Kayla said. Not what you think you should want, not what makes you look powerful, what actually matters to you. And if I don't know, then you learn. She softened slightly. Look, I'm not going to pretend we're friends. You hurt me, Roran. Publicly rejected me, let your wolves hunt me, chose someone else because she made you look better. That doesn't just go away. I know. But, she continued, I also spent 3 years with you. I know you're capable of more than what you showed. You're tactical, intelligent when you're not clouded by ego. You care about this territory even if you showed it badly. She paused. There's a decent person under all the performance. You just have to decide if you want to let him exist. Roran's eyes were suspiciously bright. He blinked hard, looking away. Why are you being kind to me, after everything? Because someone has to model what healthy leadership looks like, Kayla said, and because hating you forever would just poison me. I'd rather move forward. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You're right, you don't, but I'm not offering it for you. I'm offering it for me. She glanced at Darius, then back to Roran. You can stay in Ironvale. You can rebuild your place here, earn back trust, figure out who you are as just a pack member. But that's your choice. We won't force it. Roran stood there, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he nodded once. I'll stay, and I'll try to be better, to figure out who I am without the title. That's all we're asking, Darius said. Roran looked at him, something complicated in his expression. You're a better alpha than I was. I can admit that now. And Kayla, he turned to her, you deserve better than what I gave you. I'm sorry for all of it. Kayla nodded, accepting the apology without commenting on it. Some wounds needed time more than words. One more thing, Darius said. Sarah, do you know where she went? Roran's expression hardened slightly. Her family's cabin, like Moira said. Why? Because she's a loose thread, and loose threads have a way of becoming problems. She's not dangerous, just bitter. Bitter people do dangerous things, Kayla pointed out. Roran sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'll talk to her. Make sure she's not planning anything stupid. She was never really invested in me, just in the status I gave her. Now that I don't have it, he shrugged. She'll move on to someone else. Make sure, Darius said. I don't want surprises. Understood. They left Roran standing there and made their way back toward the main settlement as full darkness settled over Ironvale. Wolves were lighting torches and fires, the warm glow pushing back against the cold night. That went better than expected, Kayla said. Did it? He apologized. That's more than I thought we'd get. Apologizing is easy. Following through is harder. Darius watched the settlement come to life with evening activity. But you were right to push for it. Can't lead effectively with unresolved tension poisoning everything. Listen to you sounding all wise and leader-like. I'm faking it. We're all faking it. That's the secret nobody tells you. She squeezed his hand. Come on, you need to eat something and then sleep for approximately 12 hours. I need to check in with the patrols first, and Darius. She stopped walking, pulling him around to face her. You won. Blackwater retreated, the pack is stable, the alliances are forming. You can take one night to rest without everything falling apart. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist there was more to do, but exhaustion hit him like a physical wave. She was right. He was running on fumes and stubbornness, and neither was sustainable. Okay, he said. Food, then sleep. Good alpha. They made it back to Darius's quarters, which felt strange to call his now instead of just temporary shelter, and found that someone had left food and a fresh pot of tea. Kayla poured while Darius collapsed into a chair, his whole body suddenly aware of every bruise and ache. Iris is going to kill me, he muttered, noticing fresh blood seeping through one of his bandages. Iris is used to stubborn wolves. Kayla set a cup in front of him. Drink. It's got willow bark for the pain. He drank obediently, the tea bitter but warming. Kayla settled across from him with her own cup, and for a while they just sat in comfortable silence, the bond humming contentedly between them. What happens now? Kayla asked eventually. What do you mean? I mean, you're alpha. I'm your mate. We survived the crisis. But what comes next? What do we actually build here? It was a good question. Darius had been so focused on immediate threats that he hadn't thought much beyond survival. But now, with breathing room, he had to consider the future. Something different, he said slowly, working through it as he spoke. Roran's leadership was all about dominance and control, top-down, authoritarian. It worked for a while, but it made the pack brittle. One challenge and the whole structure nearly collapsed. So what's your version? Partnership? Shared responsibility? I'm alpha, but that doesn't mean I make every decision alone. He met her eyes. It means I listen to the elders, to the experienced wolves, to you. It means building consensus when possible and only pulling rank when necessary. That sounds exhausting. Probably, but it also sounds sustainable. He leaned back, thinking, and I want to change how we handle mates. The whole system is broken. Alphas treating their partners like accessories instead of equals. Bonds used for power instead of partnership. You're talking about me. I'm talking about a lot of wolves. You're just the most obvious example. He reached across the table, finding her hand. What you can do, the amplification. It's rare, but it's probably not unique. And the way pack culture handles it, the secrecy and shame and power games, it's toxic. We should be celebrating gifts like yours, not hiding them. Kayla was quiet, her thumb tracing patterns on his palm. That's a big change. Everything about the last week has been a big change. Might as well keep going. She smiled, but it was edged with something that looked like worry. You know people will resist. Change is scary, especially for wolves. We like tradition, hierarchy, clear lines. I know. But clear lines are what got Roran rejected and nearly got Ironvale conquered. He squeezed her hand. I'm not saying it'll be easy, just that it's necessary. Well then, she raised her teacup in a mock toast. To necessary revolutions and the idiots who lead them. I'll drink to that. They finished their tea in comfortable silence. Then Darius practically face-planted into bed, asleep before Kayla finished banking the fire. She crawled in beside him, the bond wrapping around them like a blanket, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they both slept deeply and without fear. Morning came with a knock on the door. Darius groaned and tried to ignore it, but the knocking persisted until Kayla finally got up and answered. Elder Moira, she said, sounding surprised. Is something wrong? Depends on your definition. Moira's voice was dry as ever. Is the Alpha awake? I am now, Darius called, forcing himself to sit up. His body protested every movement, stitches pulling, bruises throbbing. What's happened? Moira stepped into the room, leaning heavily on her cane. Sarah's gone. Left sometime during the night, took supplies, travel gear, and about half of Roran's remaining loyalists. That woke Darius up fully. He swung out of bed, ignoring the pain. How many? 20, maybe 25 wolves. Where did they go? North, from what the scouts can tell, toward Blackwater territory. Kayla swore softly. Darius felt his stomach drop. Sarah running away was one thing. Sarah running to Blackwater with Roran's former supporters was something else entirely. She's going to tell them everything, Darius said. About the bond, about the amplification, about our defenses. Probably, Moira agreed. The question is what we do about it. Darius's mind raced. Sarah knew enough to cause serious problems, knew the truth about Kayla's ability, knew which wolves were still uncertain about the leadership change, knew the defensive positions they'd set up. In Blackwater's hands, that information could be devastating. We can't chase her down, Kayla said, reading his expression. That's what she wants, to draw you away from Ironvale, make you look weak by running after a fleeing wolf. But we can't just let her tell Blackwater everything. No, Moira said, but we can get ahead of it. Tell the story ourselves, on our terms, before she can spin it into something worse. Darius looked at her sharply. What do you mean? I mean we call a full pack assembly, today, and you tell everyone, the whole truth about the bond, about Kayla's ability, about how it works and what it means. Moira's eyes gleamed. Transparency, like you talked about. No more secrets, no more wondering, just truth. It was terrifying, the idea of standing in front of the whole pack and admitting that his strength came from Kayla, that without her, he'd be just another beta. It felt like handing them ammunition to use against him. But it was also right, because secrets were what destroyed Roran's leadership. Secrets and lies and hidden power that nobody understood. Okay, Darius said. We do it today. Full assembly. Moira nodded approvingly. I'll spread the word. Noon, in the Great Hall. She left, and Darius stood there in his quarters, trying not to panic. You don't have to do this alone, Kayla said quietly. What? The assembly. I'll stand with you.
We'll tell them together. She moved closer, taking his hands. This is our bond, our partnership. Let's show them what that actually looks like. You're sure? I spent 3 years hiding what I could do, pretending to be normal, letting Roran take credit for strength he didn't earn. Her grip tightened. I'm done hiding. If we're building something new, it starts with honesty. Both of us. He pulled her into a kiss, pouring gratitude and love and terror into it. She kissed him back just as intensely, the bond flaring between them. Okay, he said when they broke apart. Together. Noon found the entire pack assembled in and around the Great Hall. Wolves packed so tightly that some had to stand outside and listen through the open doors. Darius stood at the front, Caleb beside him, Elder Moira and the other council members flanking them. The room buzzed with speculation and worry. News of Sarah's departure had spread quickly, and wolves were nervous about what it meant. Darius raised his hand and the noise died down. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded space. I know you're worried. I know there are questions about what happened last night, about Sarah and the wolves who left with her. But before we talk about that, there's something else you need to understand. Something that's been kept secret for too long. He took a breath, feeling Kayla's presence beside him, like an anchor. Many of you have wondered about the bond between Kayla and me, how it formed, what it means, why Roran's rejection didn't work the way it should have. He paused. The truth is that Kayla has a rare gift, an ability to amplify the dominance of her bonded mate. For 3 years, she used that gift to strengthen Roran, to help him lead. And when he rejected her, she transferred that bond and that amplification to me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Darius pressed on. I want to be absolutely clear about what this means. My strength as alpha, the dominance you feel from me, the power I carry, it comes from our bond. Kayla amplifies what's already there, makes it stronger, but the foundation is our partnership. Without her, I'd be, he shrugged, a decent fighter, a tactical thinker, but not alpha material. Then you're not really alpha, someone called from the back. You're just borrowing strength. No, Kayla stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. He's alpha because he has the wisdom to lead, the courage to make hard choices, and the humility to accept help. The amplification just makes others feel what was already true, that Darius is the leader this pack needs. But you could transfer it to anyone, another wolf objected. Could make any random beta seem like alpha material. Could I? Kayla's expression was challenging. Then why didn't I choose someone else? I could have bonded with any wolf in Ironvale, could have made them powerful. But I chose Darius, because strength without character is just violence, and I'm done enabling violence. The room went silent. Roran had the amplification for 3 years, Kayla continued. And what did he do with it? Made decisions based on ego instead of wisdom. Rejected his mate publicly to prove his power. Nearly lost the territory to Blackwater because he valued dominance over strategy. She looked around the packed hall. Darius has had it for less than a week, and in that time he prevented a war, formed new alliances, and showed mercy where Roran would have demanded blood. That's not borrowed strength. That's leadership. More murmurs, but the tone had shifted. Wolves were looking at each other, considering. Elder Garrett stood, his scarred face thoughtful. I have a question for Kayla. Ask it. If Darius died, or if your bond broke somehow, what would happen to the amplification? It was a good question, a scary question. Kayla met the elder's eyes steadily. It would go dormant until I bonded again. If I bonded again. She glanced at Darius. But I'm not planning on either scenario happening. Still, Garrett pressed, it means the pack's stability depends on your bond remaining intact. That's a dangerous vulnerability. No more dangerous than the old way, Elder Moira interjected. Under the traditional system, pack stability depended on the alpha's physical strength and ability to defend challenges. One bad fight, and everything collapsed. At least this way there's partnership.
redundancy. She's right, Darius said. Yes, our bond is central to my leadership, but that doesn't make it a weakness. It makes it honest. You know where my strength comes from. You know that I'm not hiding behind artificial dominance or political games. What you see is what you get. A partnership between two wolves trying to lead well. Roran stood from where he'd been sitting near the back. The room went tense, everyone watching him. For what it's worth, Roran said quietly, he's telling the truth. I had that amplification for 3 years, and I never knew it, never appreciated it, thought I was just naturally powerful. His expression was pained, but the moment Kayla left, I felt the difference, felt how much weaker I actually was, and I still didn't understand until Darius explained it to me. He moved closer to the front, addressing the crowd directly. I was a terrible alpha, he continued, his voice steady despite obvious discomfort. Too proud, too focused on looking strong instead of being strong. And when someone threatened that image, I lashed out instead of listening. That's why I rejected Kayla. That's why I nearly lost Ironvale to Blackwater. He turned to look at Darius. But Darius did what I couldn't. He accepted help. He valued partnership over pride. And that's why he's alpha now, and I'm not. The admission hung in the air, heavy with significance. So yes, Roran finished, the bond is real. The amplification is real. But what matters is what he does with it. And so far, he's doing better than I ever did. He sat back down, and the silence that followed was profound. Finally, Darren stood. I have one question for the Alpha. Ask it, Darius said. What about Sarah? She's running to Blackwater with information about all of this. What do? We do exactly what we're doing now, Darius said. We tell the truth ourselves before she can weaponize it. I'm sending messengers to every allied pack, to Blackwater, to anyone who'll listen. The message is simple. Yes, my mate amplifies my strength. Yes, our bond is central to my leadership. No, that doesn't make Ironvale weak. It makes us honest. Blackwater will use it against us, someone warned. Let them try. Darius straightened, letting the amplified presence roll out across the hall. They can know everything about how our bond works, and it won't help them. Because knowledge isn't the same as understanding. They'll see the mechanics and miss the meaning. That real strength comes from trust, from partnership, from wolves choosing to work together instead of being forced into submission. He paused, looking around the packed hall at the faces watching him. Ironvale is changing, he said. Not just leadership, but philosophy. We're going to value honesty over hierarchy, partnership over dominance, wisdom over strength. It won't be easy. Change never is. But I believe it's necessary, and I'm asking you to believe it too. Silence. Then slowly, Elder Moira began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate sound, but others picked it up. More wolves joined in, the applause building until the whole hall was thundering with it. Not universal approval, not complete acceptance, but a start. On. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Darius sent messengers to every pack within 100 miles, telling the story before Sarah could twist it. The reactions were mixed. Some alphas saw the honesty as weakness, others as refreshing innovation. But the important thing was that the information was out there, controlled and contextualized. Sarah did reach Blackwater, and Kay did try to use the information against Ironvale. He sent messages mocking Darius's borrowed strength, calling him a puppet alpha controlled by his mate. The messages went largely ignored, because in the meantime, Darius had formalized his alliance with Stone Peak, Riverbend, and 3 other packs. The coalition he'd discussed at the celebration became reality, with shared resources, coordinated patrols, and mutual defense agreements that actually meant something. Blackwater found itself increasingly isolated, their aggressive expansion suddenly stalled by a wall of unified packs who decided that cooperation was more valuable than conquest. Within Ironvale, things settled into a new rhythm. Roran found a place as a senior hunter and tactical advisor, using his knowledge of the territory without the burden of leadership. He'd never be friendly with Darius and Kayla, but he was functional, contributing, slowly earning back trust through consistent action instead of flashy gestures. Some of Roran's former loyalists who'd stayed began to accept the new order. Others remained skeptical, but even they had to admit that Ironvale was more stable now than it had been in years. And through it all, Darius and Kayla built their partnership, learning how to lead together, how to balance strength with wisdom, dominance with compassion. It wasn't always smooth. They fought sometimes, disagreed on tactics, struggled with the weight of expectation. But they worked through it, the bond helping them understand each other in ways that went beyond words. One evening, Darius found Kayla on the balcony of what had become their shared quarters, looking out over Ironvale as the sun set. "You promised me dancing," she said without turning around. He'd forgotten. With everything happening, the promise he'd made before the Blackwater confrontation had slipped his mind completely. "I did," he admitted, moving to stand beside her. "I'm holding you to it." "Now?" "Why not?" She turned to face him, her eyes bright. "The pack is stable, our allies are solid, and I'm tired of crisis after crisis. I want one normal evening, one moment that's just us, not Alpha and his amplifying mate, just us." He pulled her close, one hand finding hers, the other settling at her waist. "I don't hear any music." "Don't need it." They swayed together on the balcony, moving to a rhythm only they could feel, the bond humming contentedly between them. The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and below them Ironvale settled into evening routine, peaceful and secure. "Thank you," Darius said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself. For taking a risk on a beta who probably should have stayed in his lane." "You were never meant to stay in your lane." She rested her head against his chest. "You were always meant for this. You just needed someone to believe in you first. And you needed someone who valued you for more than what you could give them." "Look at us," she said softly. "Two broken wolves building something whole. Not broken, just unfinished." She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I like that better." They danced as the sun finished setting, as stars began to emerge overhead, as Ironvale's lights flickered to life below. And for the first time since this entire mess began, Darius felt something close to peace. The bond hummed between them, steady and strong, and he finally understood what Kayla had been trying to tell him from the beginning, that real power didn't come from dominance or force or artificial amplification. It came from trust, from partnership, from two wolves choosing to stand together against whatever came next. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. 6 months later, Elder Moira found Darius in his office, surrounded by maps and supply reports. "You look stressed," she observed, settling into a chair uninvited. "Just trying to coordinate the joint patrol schedule. Stone Peak wants to shift their routes, but that affects Riverbend's coverage and—" He stopped, seeing her expression. "What?" "I have news. Good news, for once. I could use good news. Blackwater's Alpha has been challenged." Darius sat up straighter. "By who?" "Internal dispute. One of Cade's own betas. Tired of the aggressive expansion failing repeatedly." Moira's eyes gleamed. "Word is the Challenger won. New leadership, new direction. They're looking to make peace with the coalition." Relief flooded through Darius. Blackwater had been a constant low-level threat, not actively attacking, but always there, always waiting for weakness. Having them stabilized, potentially friendly, changed everything. That's really good news." "Thought you'd appreciate it." Moira stood, preparing to leave. "You've done well, pup. Better than most alphas manage in their first year. The pack is strong, the territory is secure, and wolves are happy. That's rare. Thanks to you, and Kayla, and everyone who believed in this. Mostly thanks to you not being an idiot." She tapped her cane against the floor. "But don't let it go to your head. There's always another crisis waiting. That's leadership." "Encouraging." "I'm old. I've earned the right to be discouraging." But she was smiling as she left. Darius sat back in his chair, letting the good news settle. Blackwater stabilizing meant one less threat, meant breathing room, meant he could focus on building instead of just defending. Kayla appeared in the doorway, reading his expression. "Good news?" "The best. Blackwater's making peace." "Really?" She crossed to him, perching on the edge of his desk. "That's amazing. It means we actually pulled this off, built something sustainable." "We?" She raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure this was a team effort." "You know what I mean." She smiled, leaning down to kiss him. I do, and I'm proud of us. The bond pulsed warmly between them, and Darius felt that sense of rightness again, the feeling that despite all the chaos and difficulty and near disasters, they'd found their way to something real. Come on, Kayla said, pulling him to his feet. You've been in this office for 6 hours. Take a break. I have reports to... That will still be there in an hour. She tugged him toward the door. Live a little, Alpha. He let her pull him outside into the cool evening air, and they walked through Iron Vale together. Wolves greeted them as they passed, respectful but relaxed, the kind of easy acknowledgement that spoke of genuine acceptance rather than forced deference. This was what they'd built. Not perfect, not without problems, but functional. Honest. Strong in ways that went beyond simple dominance. They ended up at the same platform where Roran had rejected Kayla all those months ago. The memory should have been painful, but instead it felt distant, like something that had happened to different people. Do you ever regret it? Darius asked. Everything that happened? Kayla considered the question seriously. The pain, the uncertainty, being hunted in the forest? Yes, I could do without those parts. She squeezed his hand. But the result? No, I don't regret that at all. Even though it meant losing 3 years with Roran? Those weren't lost years, they were learning years. I learned what I didn't want, learned what I was capable of, learned how to value myself. She turned to face him fully. And they led me here. To you. To this. So no, I don't regret them. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring 6 months of partnership and struggle and triumph into it. She kissed him back just as fiercely, the bond flaring bright between them. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Kayla smiled up at him. Besides, she said, we make a pretty good team, even if you do ignore Healer's orders and work too much and stress about things you can't control. I don't stress that much. You stress constantly. It's kind of adorable. Adorable? In an alpha having a breakdown kind of way. He laughed, pulling her close. What would I do without you? Probably collapse from overwork and poor delegation. But she was smiling as she said it, nestling into his embrace. They stood there on the platform as night settled over Iron Vale. 2 wolves who'd been broken and discarded and deemed worthless, now leading a pack into a new era. Not because they were perfect, not because they had all the answers, but because they'd learned that real strength came from honesty, from partnership, from the courage to be vulnerable and the wisdom to accept help. And that, Darius thought, as he held his mate under the stars, was enough, more than enough. It was everything.